Amelia Carter had never believed one evening could alter the trajectory of a life. Not real life, not her life. Those things happened in books or in movies or in the delusional fantasies Lily whispered into her ear whenever she insisted Amelia needed adventure. Real life was predictable, repetitive, safe. She woke up, drank bitter instant coffee, worked long hours as a junior interior designer, listened to clients complain about couches that were either too modern or too vintage, and tried her hardest to convince herself that stability meant happiness. It worked, mostly, or at least it kept her from thinking about the choking loneliness she felt every time she came home to the same empty apartment with the same quiet air, the same solitary meals, the same unasked questions. Maybe that was why she agreed to the blind date Lily set up, because the silence had begun to feel like it was swallowing her. Maybe she was tired of being forgettable, tired of blending into crowds, tired of being the background character in her own life. But as she sat at the candlelit table of the upscale restaurant, hands trembling, heart tapping an uneven rhythm against her ribs, she wondered if she had made a very, very stupid decision. The restaurant wasn't her type at all. Everything was polished, luxurious, hauntingly quiet. The waiters wore black gloves, the menus had no prices, the chandeliers glowed softly like trapped stars. Couples sat at their tables, leaning close, whispering secrets, exchanging touches that hinted at stories she had never lived, never tasted. She felt like an imposter, sitting there in her modest navy dress, twisting her bracelet over and over until her wrist turned red. She glanced toward the entrance again, checking if her date, Daniel, had finally arrived, but the doorway remained empty except for the occasional arrival of wealthy patrons who glanced around with the ease of people used to being served and admired. Daniel was late. No, worse. He was very late. 14 minutes, then 17, then 19. Amelia tried to reassure herself that he was simply stuck in traffic or struggling with parking or maybe delayed by a last-minute phone call. But the voice in her head, the voice that always reminded her she wasn't special, wasn't desirable, wasn't chosen, whispered that he wasn't coming at all. She reached for her phone, debating whether to text Lily and ask if she'd been pranked, when the restaurant door opened again. This time, she felt it before she saw it. The strange shift in the air, the way conversations paused, the way waiters straightened slightly. A man walked in. A man who did not belong to blind dates or average routines or timing apartments or women like her. No, this man belonged to danger, to power, to the kind of world where people obeyed before they understood why. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that hugged his frame like it had been stitched on him. Every step he took was measured, purposeful, quiet, not timid, but controlled. Like he was a threat that knew its strength and chose to move softly only because it didn't need to move loudly. His hair was dark, slicked back in a way that emphasized the sharp cut of his jaw, and his eyes, God, his eyes were a deep, stormy gray, scanning the restaurant with a predator's awareness, lingering on everything but revealing nothing in return. The air around him seemed to shift, as if even the light bent subtly to accommodate him. He carried presence the way others carried wallets or keys, effortlessly, naturally, dangerously. Amelia's breath caught, but she didn't understand why. He was not her type. He was not anyone's type. He was the type of man sane people avoided. When his gaze swept across the room, she lowered her eyes instinctively as if direct eye contact might ignite something she wasn't prepared for. But then she felt it, a prickle at the back of her neck. She looked up despite herself, and his eyes were on her. Not glancing, not passing, looking, directly, intently, as if he had been searching for exactly her. Her stomach dropped, her pulse jumped. She straightened, her fingers curling into her lap, her heart screaming that this was wrong. She didn't know him. He wasn't Daniel. This wasn't part of the plan. But her body remained frozen, entranced by the intensity of his stare. He began walking toward her table. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't even think. She simply watched as he neared, his expression unreadable, his steps slow and deliberate, his presence suffocating the closer he got. When he reached her table, he paused for a fraction of a second, studying her with the quiet scrutiny of someone assessing something valuable, something he was already considering his. Amelia's voice died in her throat when he pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down, without asking, without hesitation, as if he had every right to be there, as if she had been waiting for him all along. She forced her voice out, barely a whisper. "Sorry, are you looking for someone?" He acted as if she hadn't spoken. His eyes drifted across her features, her nervous expression, her trembling hands, the slight flush creeping up her neck. Then his lips curved into a small, almost amused smile. Not warm, not friendly, a smile that hinted at secrets and threats and stories she did not want to know. "Amelia Carter," he said, his voice smooth, deep, dangerously calm. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. Her name slid out of his mouth like it belonged there, like he had said it before, like he had thought about it. Amelia felt her heart slam against her ribs. "Yes," she whispered. "That's me." He nodded, satisfied. "You're exactly on time." She blinked in confusion. Are you Daniel?" she asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. The corner of his mouth lifted, only a little, only enough to make her feel foolish. "No," he said. "But you're coming with me." The words were gentle, quiet, but they hit her like a blow. She stared at him, her breath stalling. I think you have the wrong person. I'm waiting for—" "Daniel won't be coming," he interrupted softly, leaning back in his chair. "He's been redirected." Amelia's heart pounded. "Redirected? What do you mean redirected? Who are you?" His gaze softened just enough to unsettle her further, like a storm easing only to strike harder. "My name is Lorenzo Valeri." The name meant nothing to Amelia, but it meant everything to the restaurant. She noticed it instantly, the way the waiters glanced over, wide-eyed, recognizing him, the way the couple 2 tables away stiffened, the way the bartender suddenly pretended to polish a glass, though his hands were shaking slightly. Lorenzo Valeri. The name carried a weight she did not understand, but immediately feared. She swallowed. "Listen, I think there's been a mistake." She tried again, but her voice came out too soft, too fragile. Lorenzo leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, and lowered his voice until it wrapped around her like velvet dipped in steel. "Amelia, do you see the 3 men standing near the exits?" Her eyes darted around and her stomach dropped. 3 men in black suits, all watching her, all impossibly still. "They work for me," Lorenzo continued. "If you scream, they will move before anyone can help you." Her blood turned cold. She felt the walls close in around her. "Why?" she whispered. "What do you want from me?" Lorenzo tilted his head slightly, studying her fear on the face with a strange, unreadable fascination, as if he hadn't decided whether he wanted to devour it or comfort it. "Tonight," he said softly, "you walked into the wrong restaurant. You sat at the wrong table, and you became my problem." He stood slowly, every movement deliberate. When he extended his hand toward her, it wasn't an invitation, it was a command dressed as kindness. "Get up," he said gently, "and come with me." Amelia didn't move. She couldn't. Her body was frozen between terror and disbelief. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Where would you take me?" Lorenzo leaned down closer, his breath brushing her cheek, his presence overwhelming the closer he got. "Somewhere safe," he murmured. "Safer than you are now." She flinched. "I don't even know you." "You don't need to, but you will." Before she could force her legs to move, before she could scream, before she could run, Lorenzo reached out and touched her wrist. A simple touch. Gentle, warm, but it jolted through her like an electric current. And in that moment, between fear and confusion, and the horrifying sense that fate had already made its choice, Amelia realized something that made her chest tighten. Lorenzo wasn't nervous. He wasn't uncertain. He wasn't wondering if she would obey. He already knew she would, because in his world, people did not tell him no. "Stand," he said again. And this time, she did. Her legs trembled as she rose. He stepped behind her, guiding her with the soft pressure on her back. To anyone watching, it looked like a man escorting his date, but she knew the truth. She felt the truth in the air around him, in the way people avoided his gaze, in the way his men followed silently behind them. The outside world did not know she was being taken, kidnapped, redirected, as he called it. And yet, somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath the terror, beneath the instinct to fight, was a strange pull she could not explain. It made no sense. Nothing made sense. But as Lorenzo opened the door for her and led her toward a waiting black car, Amelia knew one thing with unsettling clarity. Her blind date had not been stood up. It had been erased, and Lorenzo Valeri had replaced it. Whether fate meant to or not, he had become the beginning of a story she was no longer in control of.
Amelia didn't remember walking out of the restaurant. She didn't remember how the cold night air hit her skin or how the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and blue as Lorenzo guided her toward the sleek black car waiting at the curb. All she remembered was his hand, firm, warm, steady on her back, directing her like she was something fragile that might break or something valuable he refused to lose. The moment the car door opened, she hesitated, finally feeling the first spark of defiance break through the suffocating fog of fear wrapping around her. "I'm not getting in," she whispered, her voice shaky but stronger than before. Lorenzo paused behind her. For a moment, she thought he might snap, might drag her in, might let the darkness on his face turn into something brutal. But instead, he exhaled slowly, the breath brushing across the back of her neck. "Amelia," he said softly, too softly, "I don't hurt people who don't deserve it." She turned to face him, her heart hammering. "Then let me go." His eyes, storm gray and unreadable, locked onto hers. "I can't." Those two words chilled her more than any threat could have. Not "I won't," not "I don't want to." "I can't." She didn't understand. She didn't know if she wanted to. She stepped backward, but Lorenzo gently caught her wrist, not forcefully, not painfully, almost apologetically. "If you walk away," he murmured, leaning closer, "you'll regret it before you take 3 steps. "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why me? Why tonight? What do you want?" His jaw tightened. "You were supposed to meet Daniel. Daniel is in the hospital because someone thought he was meeting you." Amelia's breath froze. What? "He'll live," Lorenzo added calmly, "but he had the wrong name, the wrong description, the wrong table." Her knees weakened. "Someone attacked him?" Lorenzo didn't blink. "Someone was waiting for you, not for him." Her stomach dropped. "But how do you know that?" Lorenzo hesitated for the first time. Just a flicker, but enough. "Because," he said slowly, "that someone is my problem." The world tilted violently. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Are you saying someone was trying to hurt me?" "Yes," Lorenzo murmured, "and he's not finished." She stared at him, at the calm certainty in his tone, at the terrifying implication of his words, and realized something awful. He wasn't lying. Not with his posture, not with his eyes, not with the way his men scanned the street with tension carved into their shoulders. He believed it, and he believed it enough to move across the city to intercept her blind date. "I don't know anything about you." "You don't have to," he replied. Then he opened the car door wider. "Get in." She swallowed hard, torn between two impossible choices: trust a stranger who radiated danger, or risk an unseen threat that had already hurt someone because of her. She took a trembling step toward the car, and that was when she heard the sound. A soft pop, almost like a firecracker. Then something slammed into the car door inches from her face, metal denting under the impact. A bullet! Amelia screamed, stumbling backward. Lorenzo moved instantly. He grabbed her waist, pulling her behind him as his men shouted and drew their weapons, scanning rooftops, windows, shadows. "Get her inside," Lorenzo barked. Amelia's heart raced so hard she thought it might burst. Her mind couldn't keep up. Her body couldn't breathe. Someone had shot at her. At her. Not a warning, not a threat. A kill shot. Lorenzo's grip tightened as he shielded her with his own body, pushing her toward the open door. "Now," he hissed. "Inside." And this time, she didn't hesitate. Amelia had never been inside a car moving that fast, not even in the chaotic rush-hour traffic of the city, but Lorenzo's driver drove like the devil was riding their bumper. The tinted windows blurred the streetlights into streaks of gold as the car swerved through traffic with terrifying precision.
Amelia sat pressed against the leather seat, chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid breaths, her fingers gripping the belt so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart still hadn't recovered from the gunshot, from the way the bullet had slammed into metal inches from her face, from the way Lorenzo had pulled her against him like she was something precious he couldn't afford to lose. She could still feel his warmth on her skin, still smell the subtle scent of smoke and cedar that clung to him, still hear the sharp command in his voice when he shoved her into the car. Now he sat beside her, one hand braced on the edge of the seat, the other pressed against the back of her head as if shielding her even now. His jaw was tense, eyes fixed on the road ahead with a cold fury simmering beneath the surface, an anger he wasn't trying to hide anymore. Amelia forced her voice out, though it shook uncontrollably. Did someone actually shoot at me? Lorenzo didn't look at her. Yes. The simple, flat confirmation made her stomach twist violently. Why? Why would anyone... Because he was waiting, Lorenzo cut in, his voice low, dangerous, and when he saw you walking toward the car, he took the shot. She felt sick. At me? Lorenzo finally turned to face her. His eyes were still stormy, still dark, but now the fury had softened into something else, something protective and frighteningly intense. He wasn't aiming for me, he said quietly. He aimed directly at you. A shiver crawled down her spine. She felt her throat tighten as panic began to rise again. I don't understand, she whispered. I'm nobody. I don't have enemies. I'm a designer, Lorenzo. I pick fabric colors for a living. Why would anyone want to kill me? Lorenzo watched her for a long moment, too long, before he finally spoke. People don't have to know you, he said softly. They just have to mistake you. Or choose you. She blinked, confused. What does that even mean? Lorenzo inhaled slowly, turning his gaze back to the road as the car tore down a dark tunnel. It means the man who attacked Daniel wasn't after Daniel. He was after you. And when he realized he'd missed you at the restaurant, he followed your description. Amelia stared at him, her pulse quickening. Followed my description from where? Lorenzo's silence was sharp enough to cut. That was when she realized he knew something he hadn't told her, something larger, something darker. Lorenzo, she whispered, her voice trembling, how long have you known someone was after me? His jaw flexed. He didn't answer, not right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was too controlled, long enough that tonight wasn't an accident. Her breath hitched. You mean, you were already watching the restaurant? Lorenzo didn't look ashamed or guilty or conflicted. He looked resigned. Yes, Amelia felt her heart sink. Because of me? Because of him, Lorenzo corrected sharply, because he was looking for you. She stared at him, confusion and fear swirling together in her chest. But who is he? Who is this man? Lorenzo remained silent. Amelia leaned closer, desperate now. If someone is trying to kill me, you need to tell me why. Lorenzo finally turned his head, and the moment his eyes locked onto hers, the world seemed to still. His voice was quiet, heavier than anything he'd said before. Because, he murmured, a month ago, he killed someone close to me. Amelia felt her breath catch. And now, Lorenzo continued, he's using you to get to me. The air in the car went cold. Amelia stared at him, unable to speak, unable to think, unable to process the meaning behind his words. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed, terrified, out of place in a world she didn't belong to. His world. The car continued speeding down the road before suddenly turning into a private underground entrance. The heavy steel door slid open as soon as the vehicle approached, as if someone had been watching, waiting for his arrival. The tunnel inside was dimly lit, the walls made of polished concrete. She realized with a sinking heart that wherever they were going, it wasn't somewhere she could easily walk out of. The car came to a stop. Lorenzo opened his door first, stepping out with the graceful authority of someone who owned every space he walked into. When he opened her door, he didn't offer his hand like before. He didn't have to. The coldness in his expression had been replaced by something tighter, something she didn't recognize. Stay close, he said. Don't speak to anyone. Don't look away from me. Understand? She wanted to protest. She wanted to demand answers. She wanted her ordinary life back. But she simply nodded,
because at that moment, she wasn't sure she could even stand without him. Lorenzo guided her through the entrance with a hand on her back. The underground facility was silent except for distant footsteps and muffled radio chatter. Men who looked more like soldiers than guards paused when they saw Lorenzo, immediately stepping aside. Their eyes flicked to Amelia, some curious, some confused, but none dared ask who she was. Lorenzo led her into a private elevator and pressed a button without looking at her. The doors closed. The space felt too small, too quiet. Amelia finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Lorenzo, where are we?" He didn't look at her. Safe. A frustrated tear escaped her eye. She wiped it quickly. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "One moment I'm waiting for a blind date and the next I'm being shot at, and now you're telling me this is all because of someone I've never met?" Lorenzo's eyes softened. He turned to her slowly. "I know," he said, quietly. "And I'm sorry." The apology shocked her more than anything, not because it sounded sincere, but because it cost him something to say it. The elevator stopped, the door slid open, and the world on the other side was nothing like she expected. The elevator opened into a world Amelia never imagined, one that didn't belong beneath the streets of a city, but beneath the surface of a kingdom. The space was enormous, stretching into a wide hall with marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Golden wall sconces cast a warm glow over the dark, expensive wood panels. Men in tailored suits stood like silent statues along the corridor, each of them armed, each of them alert, each of them bowing their head respectfully the moment Lorenzo stepped out. But their eyes, every one of them, shifted toward her with restrained curiosity. She felt exposed again, like she had walked into a secret ceremony she was never supposed to witness. Lorenzo placed a hand at the small of her back, not possessive, not forceful, but steady, grounding. "Ignore the looks," he said quietly. "They're only surprised." She swallowed. "Surprised? Because I'm here?" "Surprised," he corrected without breaking stride. "Because I brought you here." They moved through the corridor, turning into a private wing separated by a biometric lock. When the door opened, everything changed. The cold professionalism of the outer area was replaced by the warmth of a home. Dark leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the underground garden, art pieces displayed on recessed walls, a lingering scent of sandalwood and smoke. It was beautiful, controlled, powerful, and lonely. The loneliness was what struck her most. "Is this where you live?" she asked softly. "For now," Lorenzo replied. "Until things are handled." Handled. The way he said it sent a chill down her arms. Amelia stood in the center of the room, unsure of what to do, her heart pounding too loudly in her chest. Lorenzo walked ahead, removing his suit jacket and tossing it over the back of a chair. He loosened his cuffs, rolled up his sleeves, and for the first time since the chaos of the street, he exhaled like a man carrying more weight than he could show. "Sit," he said gently, gesturing toward the couch. She obeyed, not out of fear, but because her legs were trembling and she finally realized how exhausted she was. Lorenzo poured water into a crystal glass and handed it to her. She gripped it with both hands, her fingers cold, her mind spinning. Minutes passed before she finally whispered, "You said the man trying to kill me killed someone close to you." Lorenzo froze. Not visibly, not dramatically, but in a way she sensed deeply, like she had pressed a bruise directly over his heart. He turned away, resting his palms on the edge of the marble counter. His shoulders tensed, his jaw worked. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "My brother." Amelia's breath caught. "He was killed 6 weeks ago," Lorenzo continued. "The man who murdered him calls himself Dorian Creed. He's unpredictable, violent, and obsessed with making me suffer." His fingers curled slowly against the marble. "My brother's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning." Amelia stood slowly, taking a hesitant step toward him.
But what does that have to do with me? Lorenzo turned, his eyes meeting hers with a truth he could no longer shield her from. Because Creed didn't kill my brother for business. He killed him to get to me. And now, he's using you the same way. He's using you as bait, Amelia. Her breath faltered, her chest tightening painfully. But how does he even know who I am? Lorenzo hesitated. Barely, but enough for her to notice. You were seen with me, he finally said, on 2 different nights, once outside my office, once at the restaurant street last week. Amelia's eyes widened. That wasn't me. I wasn't there. Lorenzo stepped toward her. Too close. Too intense. I know that now. His voice softened. But he didn't. Amelia felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the back of a chair for support. Her life, her ordinary, quiet, predictable life was unraveling in ways she couldn't comprehend. This wasn't misfortune. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a nightmare woven around her by a stranger she had never met. A stranger who wanted her dead. A stranger who wanted Lorenzo to break. Lorenzo gently reached for her hand. She didn't pull away, not because she trusted him, but because she needed something to hold on to before the ground disappeared beneath her feet. You're not safe out there, Amelia, he said softly. Not for now, not until I find Creed. She looked up at him, fear swirling with something else, something she couldn't name. So, what happens now? Lorenzo's fingers curled around hers, firm and steady. Now, he murmured, you stay here, with me, under my protection. Her heart stuttered. But my apartment, my job, my things. All already taken care of, Lorenzo interrupted. Your building has security posted outside. Your boss received a message saying you're under medical leave. He paused. I did what I had to do. Amelia felt her stomach twist. You're controlling my life now? No. His voice dropped. A low, intense promise. I'm keeping you alive. Silence settled between them, thick, charged, confusing. Then the door burst open. 2 guards rushed in, breathless. Boss, Creed sent a message. Lorenzo stiffened. What message? The guard swallowed. He said, tell Lorenzo I've seen the girl, and tell him she screams beautifully. Amelia's blood ran cold. Lorenzo's face turned into stone. The storm had just begun. The room fell into a suffocating silence after the message was delivered. Amelia felt her pulse racing in her throat, her fingertips numb, her mind unable to process the horror of what she had just heard. He's seen the girl. She screams beautifully. The words echoed inside her skull like a dark chant. She wrapped her arms around herself, instinctively stepping backward, her back hitting the wall. Lorenzo, on the other hand, did not move. He stood perfectly still, his posture sharp as glass, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his neck twitched. The air around him changed, thickened, like he was no longer a man but a gathering storm preparing to break apart the sky. Leave us, he said to the guards. His voice was quiet, too quiet, the type of quiet that made even armed men obey without breathing a word. When the door closed behind them, the silence grew even heavier. Amelia could practically hear the thud of her own heartbeat in her ears. Lorenzo turned toward her slowly, as if afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the last fragile piece of stability holding them together. He's bluffing, Lorenzo said at last, though his eyes betrayed the lie. He wants to scare you. He wants to get inside your mind. Amelia hugged herself tighter. It worked, she whispered.
her voice cracking. "I'm terrified, and that's exactly what he wanted." Lorenzo took a single step toward her. "You're safe here." "How do you know?" Amelia whispered. "He found me once. He could find me again." Lorenzo stepped closer, his presence a dark, overwhelming force. "Because this time," his hand lifted, but stopped inches from her cheek. "This time, I'm not letting him anywhere near you." But Amelia wasn't reassured. Fear had burrowed deep inside her bones, and no promise, no matter how fiercely spoken, could erase it. Lorenzo exhaled slowly, running his hand through his hair, pacing the room like a caged wolf. "He's escalating. He wants to provoke me, make me act recklessly. He thinks using you will break me." He turned to her again. "He thinks you're my weakness." Amelia swallowed. "Am I?" The question froze Lorenzo mid-step. He looked at her, really looked at her for a long moment. His eyes softened, just slightly. He admitted, "I don't know, but he believes you are, and that puts you in danger." Amelia looked away, her throat tightening. The realization was crushing. Her life had twisted into something she didn't recognize, something terrifying and uncertain. She wasn't simply caught in the crossfire anymore. She was part of the strategy. Lorenzo approached again, this time slower, his steps purposeful. "I need you to trust me," he said. "You're not a hostage. You're not trapped. You're under protection." Amelia let out a soft, shaky breath. "It feels the same." His expression flickered. Hurt, frustration, guilt. But he forced it down. "Come with me," he said. She hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere safer." Her stomach nodded. "Safer than this underground fortress?" "Yes," he said simply, and the seriousness in his eyes made her follow without further protest. He led her down a long corridor to a heavily reinforced doorway, a retinal scanner, then a keypad, then a fingerprint lock. When the door opened, Amelia expected another suite, another guarded room, another gilded cage. But what she found instead was something she hadn't anticipated at all, a hidden panic room, vast, silent, dimly lit, with thick, bulletproof walls, emergency supplies, surveillance screens monitoring the entire compound, and a discreet living area inside. It was quiet enough that she could hear her own breathing in her ears. "This isn't a prison," Lorenzo said, watching her expression. "This is the one place I know he cannot reach." Amelia walked forward, touching the metal frame of the doorway. Everything about the space felt final, secure, permanent. It frightened her more than she expected. "You want me to stay here? For how long?" Lorenzo's jaw flexed. "Until I take care of him." "How long will that take?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Amelia turned toward him, fear mixing with anger and disbelief. "I can't hide in here forever." "You won't," he said firmly. "I swear." "You can't promise that." Lorenzo stepped closer, his voice low, intense. "I can promise that no harm will come to you while you're under my protection." She met his gaze, trembling. "I didn't choose any of this." "I know." His voice softened to something dangerously gentle. "But I'm asking you to survive it." Silence wrapped around them again, heavy, thick, intimate. Lorenzo reached out and touched her wrist lightly, as if afraid she might break. "You are not alone in this," he murmured. "I'll be here, every minute." Amelia's breath hitched at the sincerity in his tone, at the depth of emotion he tried so hard to hide. But before she could respond, an alarm blared through the walls, sharp, urgent, violent. Lorenzo's head snapped toward the cameras. Someone had breached the outer gate, and this time they were closer. The alarm's echo had barely faded before Lorenzo slammed his palm against the console, pulling up the security feeds one by one. Amelia stepped forward instinctively, her breath trembling as she stared at the shifting screens. Men in black tactical gear were pouring through the outer perimeter like shadows splitting from darkness, silent, coordinated, deadly. Her heart thudded painfully. Is it him? She whispered. Lorenzo didn't answer. His jaw clenched, his eyes locked onto the screen that showed 5 men sprinting toward the inner gate. It's Creed's men, he said finally. He's getting bold. He stabbed a button on the console. Lockdown protocol, level 7. The lights in the panic room flickered red for a moment before stabilizing. Heavy steel shutters slammed down over the entrances of the compound, echoing through the walls like thunder. Another alarm followed, lower, deeper, more ominous. Amelia wrapped her arms around herself. What does level 7 mean? Lorenzo exhaled slowly, eyes still on the screens. It means they're inside the compound. A shiver tore down her spine. Lorenzo! Stay behind me, he said firmly, turning to face her fully. He grabbed her shoulders, holding her still. Do not leave this room, no matter what you hear. Amelia shook her head. You can't go out there alone. I'm not alone, he said, his voice hardening. I have a full security team. And Creed has killers, she whispered. Lorenzo, you can't. His hand cupped her cheek without warning, stopping her words, stilling her breath. It was the gentlest touch he had ever given her. I'll come back. I always come back. Her chest tightened painfully. For a moment, she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. You can't promise that, but I need you to. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue. He just held her gaze, something raw and unguarded flickering in his eyes before he stepped away. The panic room door slid open as he entered his code. The hallway beyond glowed red under emergency lights. His guards were already assembling, shouting tactical commands. Lorenzo turned once more to look at her, only once, before the door sealed shut between them with a thundering click. Amelia pressed her palms against the cold metal, her breath shaky, her heartbeat frantic. Every instinct told her to run after him, to stop him, to scream that she wasn't worth dying for. But she stayed, because he'd asked her to, because she trusted him without understanding why. Minutes felt like hours as she stared at the screens. The compound was a maze of gunfire, shadows, and chaos. Guards moved in formation, defending the inner grounds. Creed's men entered with terrifying precision, like they knew the layout, like they had studied it. Amelia's stomach twisted. Someone must have helped them. Betrayal blossomed through her mind like a poison. Suddenly, one screen shifted. Lorenzo appeared moving through the corridor with 3 of his top guards. He was all command, all fury, all lethal calm. Then the feed glitched. Static. A flash of white. Then darkness. Lorenzo? She whispered at the screen. No, come back. Another feed flickered. Gunshots echoed through the speakers. A guard fell. A silhouette moved like a phantom through the shadows. Tall, controlled, confident. A chill slid down her spine when she realized who it was. Dorian Creed. He stepped into the camera's view only for a moment and smiled. A cold, amused, terrible smile, like he knew she was watching. Like this was all part of a sick, twisted game. Amelia stumbled backward, her breath catching in her chest. Oh, God. Creed leaned casually against the wall in the feed before speaking directly at the camera. A taunt, a message. His lips moved even though the audio was cut. Found you. Amelia slapped her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. She spun toward the panic room exit, terror racing through her veins. She knew it was reinforced, she knew it was unbreakable, but the thought of Creed walking anywhere near Lorenzo made something inside her snap. She couldn't just stand here. She couldn't just wait. Her fingers hovered over the manual override. No, I can't stay here while he... Her voice cracked. Her body trembled. Her fear shifted. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't terrified for herself. She was terrified for Lorenzo.